Hey everyone, how's it going? I hope you're all doing great and you're following the 3 H's of the channel, which are happy, healthy, and hydrated. And in this video, it's all about humanoid encounters. So if that sounds like something you're interested in, pull up a stump with me and let's jump into it. Thank you for watching. I'm not sure if this is one of those pale crawlers or not, but this happened around 10 or 11 years ago. I lived in Perth, Western Australia. Me and my best friend lived in the same suburb at the time, so when it came to weekends, we usually just went exploring around parks and the Quarry in our neighborhood. It was late at night, and we were still just wandering the streets near our house, doing whatever we were doing, I don't remember. We dared ourselves to go into the Quarry at night, which is pitch black and surrounded by bushland. It's a decent-sized area, bigger than a football field. We chickened out at the entrance, and I decided to sit on a rock just outside the Quarry while we were chatting. So just to give you an idea of my position, my back was facing the bushes in the Quarry, and I was facing forward toward my friend, talking to her. Her face suddenly went blank mid-conversation, and she just froze up for a few seconds before sprinting off and yelling at me to run after her. I had no idea what was going on, but I ended up booking it. Honestly, I thought it was some sort of human threat, like a dodgy person. We ran like 2 streets down before she managed to stop, and I couldn't get her to talk for a few minutes. She was absolutely terrified. She told me that when she was talking to me, a face appeared just to the left of my shoulder, probably around 1 meter back, coming from the bushes. She couldn't really see if there was a body, but she just described the face. She said that it was just evil and had this menacing presence that she couldn't describe. I can't get her to accurately describe what she saw, but she says that it was like the features weren't defined. She says that the eyes were blackened, and she thinks that it had a grin on its face. Effing terrifying. So I had some pictures of the time, but I can't find them at the moment, so I'll just tell the story. I was a combat engineer in eastern Afghanistan. The platoon I was in got pulled when we got there from our job of route clearance to doing guardian angel, or babysitting advisors at COPs, FOBs, and all over RC East. It was December of 2018, a couple of months of running these missions at a tiny abandoned COP called Naglu up in the mountains. My squad plus PSG, 2 infantry squads, and the advisor team. An SF team came too, but as soon as we got there, they went off to probably kill things, I guess, and we didn't meet them again until the exfil. We air assault in on Chinooks to clear the abandoned COP and occupy it. We divvy up guard shifts and towers. My squad only has 1 since the infantry was there just to do security and our job was to guard advisors. I decide to pull the middle of the night shift to at least give each of my Joes 4 hours of uninterrupted sleep, like 1 to 2 or 1 to 3. As our time there continues, we do a few missions talking to ANA and locals. I pull my guard shifts and start noticing things through my thermals. These are always during times when I'm just staring off into nearby ridges and hills. I keep seeing shambling figures on the hills, which made no sense at the time of night, miles away from the nearest village. By this point, I had learned that Afghans are a superstitious bunch. They have no reason to be out there. There's no tactical movement, or normal human walking for that matter, just this weird shambling. I ask the PSG, who had been on 2 prior deployments, about it. He says not to worry about it. 10 days later, I get pulled out early because snowstorms were coming in, and I guess I had to go back there for a couple days missions after. And then, way after I'm out of the military, I hear stories from other guys about zombies out in the desert in Afghanistan, and it kind of clicks. That place has seen hundreds of years of death and hatred. It's not unbelievable that some of that somehow manifests. This isn't really a fancy or exciting story, just what I saw. Some really strange and creepy stuff happened when me and my cousin went hunting. I wrote a bunch of stuff down on my notepad in my phone in case something happened to me. That's how scared I was. And after the stuff in my notepad ends, I will just finish what happened after. So here we go. Currently camping, sort of. Cousin and I went hunting this weekend. It went well. But come Sunday evening, I decided to stay at the cabin for another 2 days due to having extra vacation time from work. My cousin left at sundown Sunday. Last night, coyotes howled all through the night, as they usually do in this area, Colorado, a few hours north of Boulder. But around 2:30 a.m., after several minutes of howling, they all suddenly stopped, seemingly all at once. I'd woken up to the sound of them, and I've never heard them all stop so suddenly. It was as if they just switched off. Several minutes of silence followed, which was unusual, as usually some light yipping follows of some kind. Eventually, after some time, I heard the most piercing, loud, guttural howl I have ever heard in my life, and for reference, I grew up in the woods like this, and I regularly have been in them for 26 years. I've heard it all. And this was the first noise that ever gave me that cold, creeping sense of dread where you freeze, even just for a second. It sounded like a coyote being torn apart before sputtering out into a lower tone, then silence. I sat, nothing more. I figured it must be just that, something dying, and shrugged it off. Until today, I decided to hit the creek to just chill and read, until the scream came again. At about 5:45 p.m., the stench came, horribly. I went to look for its source. Eventually, I was led to my porch. I couldn't make it out, but it looked like that something was hanging out at the wood's edge, just squatting, staring at me. I looked back at it, or what I could see of it. It was just barely visible with the little light outside of the porch. The longer I stared, the more I felt like it was reading me, or sizing me up. After a few minutes of this, I slowly went back into the cabin, locked the door. I put a heavy table that was in the cabin against the door, and put my gun beside my bed. And that was all I had written in my phone, but this is what happened after. I must have eventually passed out because I woke up just after dawn. I packed my stuff, moved the table back, and went to leave. I found that the light that hung off the porch was destroyed, and there were footprints all around the cabin, as well as what looked like scratch marks on the outside of the wall where I was sleeping. I got in my truck and left. There's no big dramatic ending. I just left before things escalated anymore, and afterwards, from reading a lot of other people's experiences, I'm very glad that I did. And this was sent in by Michael Lapine. I hope I pronounced your last name right. So Michael, I hope I can do your story justice as well. My wife and my mother-in-law recently moved to Murfreesboro, Tennessee, and I often went to Bicentennial Park in Franklin. I had an encounter with a Tennessee lizard man. I love to share my story. I also have photos of its tracks. There's no known reports of lizards in the area large enough to make these prints. I love to share my story. To which I replied, I'd love to hear your story. And the reply goes like this. I also have a tale of an encounter with a small gray alien in Connecticut about 13 years ago. My wife and mother-in-law had gone to Bicentennial Park in Franklin many of the times in the north. We had lived in Tennessee since we had moved. There's a small cement overlook I love to fish off of. One day, I'm there with my mother-in-law. My wife left us to go get some Uber Eats. I started fishing. I got my line snagged. I went to the left of the overlook to find a way down to the bank. I tell my mother-in-law to stay up there as the bank was muddy and I didn't want her to slip and fall. As I made my way down, I got an enormous sense of unease, kind of like that sixth sense of extreme danger being close. I started looking around. I found a set of bipedal, I guess lizard prints are the best way I can describe it. They resemble an alligator, but they were only 2 feet and no drag marks from a tail. The prints were almost as big as my hand. At that point, I got off my knee as I had knelt to examine the prints. I looked across the small river. At this point, it's dusk. I see a small set of yellow eyes standing about 3.5 feet tall. I immediately started toward the bank, but kept slipping down because of the mud. At first, I heard a massive hissing. My mother-in-law heard it too, and immediately laid on her stomach and reached out her hand, yelling, "Hurry, it's coming." Then came a massive growl, nothing like I'd ever heard. As I made it to the top of the bank, I looked back, just to see a creature jump into the river. It was hominid, green and scaly, and a massive tail. To this day, we refuse to go within 10 miles of Bicentennial Park in Franklin, Tennessee. So thank you to Michael for sending that in. I hope I could do your story justice. This was sent in by Al. So Al, I hope I can do your story justice. This was in Pennsylvania, not far from the border of West Virginia. In 2016, I drove down for a funeral. I'm in New York, and I had time to kill. I asked my family about an area that the Bigfoot Mapping Project had several sightings in. I went looking for a cave, or more likely an old coal mine. I never found it, but while walking in the woods, it got quiet, and I felt fear out of nowhere, and I spotted a werewolf. Later, I learned they were called dogmen, watching me. It was a good 100 feet away and next to a tree, but I could see its face and partial body. I couldn't move. Out of nowhere, there was a loud whistle that sort of broke me out of it. Seconds later, this beast dropped and exploded into motion, thankfully, heading away from me. Fast forward to last year when my cousin sent the screenshot. He lived down there. I asked for the video, but sadly never received it, and he was found dead not long after of an overdose. That part of the family is strange and doesn't really talk to us. My dad left the coal mines years ago, and I felt that he abandoned them. I feel vindicated that there was proof, but everyone thinks of AI now. My other experience was when I was 12 in 1992 and trespassed onto what I believe was now a Bigfoot's turf. Me and a friend were chased out but never saw the creature. That night, in front of my best friend, I was pulled across the room while I was laying down on the floor with one of those pillows that have armrests. My friend said that all he saw was a ripple in the air behind me. That event changed my life. I lost my best friend since he wouldn't talk to me after that night. I stayed out of the woods for years. I swear on all that could be sweared on. I take a lie detector test to prove that I'm not making this up. This happened. It screwed me up for a bit, and the only way I got over it was talking about it. I was ridiculed and called crazy, but I don't care. So thank you to Al for sending that in and for the picture. I hope I could do it justice for you. This happened in Germany, and I was 16 years old at the time. I was in the forest with some friends. It's the same forest that we've gone to since we were children. We were just here for vacation though, as I now live in another country. So I'm walking around with my friend Paul. Paul and I love exploring and finding cool stuff all the time. Like this one time, half buried in the dirt, we found an external fuel tank from a plane from the Second World War. This time, we decided to go a bit further, following a creek in the primarily pine tree part of the forest. The pine forest always made me uneasy, as this specific species of tree, I don't know the name, grows very densely It grows enough to make it dark as shit, even during the daytime. So Paul and I are whistling and laughing and throwing rocks at trees and stuff. We didn't realize how far we'd gone. We carry on for a little while longer, and then the conversation just kind of dips off. We stop talking for a little bit, and it gets very quiet around us. This is odd because usually there's at least birds, but all we hear is the sound of the water from the creek. We start to get a little spooked. That we shouldn't be here feeling sets in hard. So we turn back and feel like we've made the right decision to call this expedition quits. We were wrong. This is the part where shit gets really weird. As we continue to walk, we can tell that the sunlight is fading and that we are a long way into the pine part of the forest. I ask my friend to check his watch. It's also a whole lot later than we thought it was. We pick up the pace, but it gets dark very fast. It's almost pitch black now. We can only really see and hear the stream. I'm about as close to shitting myself as one could get. I ask my friend if he thinks that we're going to make it, but I get no reply. I ask again, and still nothing. I'm about to ask again, but before I can, I feel a hand on my mouth. I hear my friend's voice. "Shut up, you jackass. Didn't you hear that?" I feel relieved, scared, and more scared when I realize that he is implying that something besides us made a noise. I hear a growling, a very deep growling, not like a dog. I don't know what the hell it is. I have never encountered a stray dog, and this place is as rural as Germany gets, and there are no wolves. My friend and I get scared, absolutely shitless. I can't tell where the growling is coming from. We stand there and wait for what seems like forever. The growling eventually dissipates. We decide to move on. We walk forward another 10 minutes and see light. The path that we used to get in is up there. We look at each other and actually see each other's faces. There's a sense of relief that I can tell we both feel. The growling is now in the distance. We're not too worried about it, since it's kind of off by itself. And then we hear running, bipedal running, from quiet to what seemed like extremely close, really fast. We turn and haul ass. We burst through the bushes and finally make it out. Both of us fall onto the grass. I look back and see not one, but several dark humanoid figures. They all crouch down and go back into the forest. My friend and I hug each other. We're shaken. I stay the night at his house, but neither of us sleep. Finally, I have a chance to share my story. I have witnesses that can account to my stark fear the night it happened. Unfortunately, they still laugh at me about my claims to this day. I used to live on Davis Road in Loveland, Ohio. I lived in an old cabin with a friend. I cannot remember the exact date for the life of me, but I do remember it being December of 2013. It was approximately 10 at night, and it was one of the first snows on a fairly cold, almost freezing night. When I first moved in with my friend, I had no idea about frogman or mothman or pope-lick monsters. Sometimes, when I was exploring the creek next to the cabin that led to a stone's throw distance to the Little Miami River, I found carefully stacked towers of stones in the creek. I felt it was very strange and had a leery feeling about them. It seemed like something a witch was doing, maybe for ceremonial purposes. Although I wasn't exactly 100% sure, I usually slept it off as something the neighbor kids were doing. But what was even odder and scarier is the very next day I noticed stacks of rocks would change and move to different spots. Sometimes there were more of them in certain areas. A part of my mind passed the notion off as seismic actions in the ground and a flow of water in the creek. Very peculiar, yet feeling like I was always being watched. I felt special and afraid at the same time. It was one of those things that I always hastened to mention until now, and till this day, I can show someone where it is. I moved in late summer, and the nights came with the sound of screeching, hissing, and growling animals, way in the distance at first. Here's where it starts to get scary. It seriously felt like whatever animal that was fighting or in pain was knowing that I could hear it from a vast distance. I would purposely summon the anguished screeches sometimes, and as the summer turned to fall, the screeching came closer and closer, huffs, hisses, and seemed to puff air and growls. This phenomenon was so similar to a raccoon in a fight that it was very easy to pass it off as just that, a fighting raccoon, or a raccoon fighting with a cat. But again, something was different, and that feeling of empowerment came with it. It got to a point that I felt like I had the power to sort of call it out. As fall approaches winter, the crying raccoon, or almost like a deer warning call, came and seemed to meander around the forest that surrounded the cabin that we lived in. I never really believed in ghosts and ghouls, so I'd pass it off as my mind playing tricks on me with the sound of the waves and the current of the Little Miami River. Then, as the leaves were almost all gone, there was the first snowfall that year. I was on the back patio of the cabin when the screeching animal sound was at the hillside directly behind our cabin in the backyard. At first, I was excited. Finally, I could confirm that the two red glowing eyes were a creature hunting and attacking a raccoon. But then the eyes looked directly at me. I thought to myself, no way is it looking at me. But it was. It was a black, dark mass. I spoke in a whisper and dared it to come at me. I was completely taken back and petrified when out of nowhere, one of the eyes lifted up really high and the other eye to join it. This black, massive object or thing seemed to be very curious at me and started tracing the hillside headed towards my way. It started a vertical path about 300 yards away. I even remember saying, no way is it really coming my way. But I knew it was. It got louder. It was big and thumped in the rough and got quicker and quicker. I challenged whatever this creature was and stood my ground until it was literally only a few dozen yards away, trampling toward me. And when it thumped closer, it got fast and seemed monstrous and huge. Yes, I turned and ran in excited fear for my life. So much fear that I jumped over my friend's motorcycle and ran into the house, slamming the door behind me. I ran inside and bolted upstairs, charging into my friend's room upstairs, where they were all playing video games and acting like nothing was happening. My one friend Jim went to the window laughing at me and said yes, that there seemed to be a gust of escaping steam in the cold winter night, shining against the light of the back porch security light. My friends joke at me till this day. They say Frogman says hi. They said it was a frog lady in love with me. I know what I saw. I am not crazy. I hate that nobody else was there with me, and I'll never summon that beast ever again. So let me know what you thought about those encounters. Did one stick out to you? If so, let me know which one it was down in the comments. Do you have one of your own? As always, I have an email in the description below that you can send them to if you'd like to. Also down in the description is a PayPal and a Patreon if you would like to support the channel that way. Generally with the Patreon, you get the videos probably a day or so early. And with that, I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, then please like and subscribe. And if you're new here, I'll put up some other videos right around here somewheres that you can check out if you'd like to. And I'd like to thank you for pulling up a stump, and I'll see you in the next one. Thank you for watching.